Tell me if this is happening to you or this is you. You are developing your Power Automate flows, your Power Apps, your Power Platform components. While you're developing, of course, you're going to be introducing some errors, some bugs in your processes. That's normal in the development of any solution or enhancement. But what's not normal is that you are affecting end users while you are developing. If that's you, I think this course is going to be very beneficial because you'll learn the basic and most important practice any IT professional uses to avoid these problems, which is affect end users while you are developing or enhancing existing solutions. We want them to have a stable system while we are developing and testing these new developments. And basically, this is called separating in environments, development and test environments from production environments. So allow me to remind you of or introduce you to the most basic yet the most important principle, in my opinion, for any IT practice, IT configuration, development of any kind of solution. And this is basically the separation in different what we call environments, which are isolated boxes. And normally we do that in three separate boxes, which is one for development, where we are going to be crafting the solution. A second one for testing, which is the one where ideally key users are going to be testing a more or less stable version of the solution. And then production, where the end users are working day-to-day basis with the latest and most stable version of what we have developed. This way, we are ensuring that where we are developing, and of course, we will be creating bugs or things that don't work quite well along the way. While we do that, users are not disrupted in their day-to-day operations. Now, this is very common. Probably you already know that as an end user or even from the implementation side of things. But we have to remind ourselves always that when we are using low-code technologies such as the Power Platform, this also applies. Not only applies, but it's more important than ever. Because normally what we see is that people just go straight to the default environment, which we will see in a moment what an environment is in Power Platform. And they just straight out shoot, create a Power Automate flow, create a canvas app, whatever, and then bring value to their peers, team, department, the organization. This is great. But what happens when that thing starts being used and then it becomes a crucial part of a business process? And then you are asked to introduce or enhance or correct something from within this solution, flow, app, wherever it is. So while you're investigating or creating these new features, you introduce bugs, and then things start going sideways off the track. And then you start getting complaints because that thing is not working as expected, as it used to be working. Now that's a problem because that what you have accomplished is created a timing bomb that nobody wants to touch, because if you touch it, then you are completely destroying the productivity of your company, because in the end you are disrupting day-to-day operations. And we don't want that. We want to isolate what's happening behind the scenes, developing the messy things that happens when we are developing solutions, any solution, whether it's low code, pro code, or a mix of them, from what users see in their day-to-day operations. Now, this may sound like a ton of extra work that you didn't account for from the beginning, or something that it really doesn't happen that much. Why would I need to create these extra environments and this extra effort to deploy between development, test, and production? Well, if the quality and stability of the solution doesn't convince you, let me tell you about 4 more benefits that are very important not only for you, but for your organization, team, your department, the people you work with. First, you really are going to have a faster time to market. Why? You are not having to work like triplicate or duplicate. No, what you are avoiding is this putting of fires constantly while you are developing something new or enhancing an existing feature of your solution. People are calling you that this is not working, and then you have to fix that other bug, and then priorities can start to stack upon one upon another, and things can get very messy very quickly. If you stop that from happening because you isolate things, you detach, you are developing in the developer environment, and people are working in the production environment, then you have more freedom and focus time to work on the things that really matter and focus on these enhancements that you need to be really grinding on right now, or whatever it is. So you are going to have a faster time to market in the end. It's not more work, it's a better methodology that will allow you to focus on the things that matter. And in the end, it's going to allow you to move faster to getting those new enhancements, these new features dialed in. Second real important benefit is risk mitigation, which is not only for you to ensure better quality, but for the end users that are going to be using that solution. Because you want to detect bugs or errors before they are being deployed to production and affect the daily operations of your users. Why and how? Well, if you have this middle environment, the testing environment, where you have a more stable version that where users are ensuring that the functionalities that you have developed and the ones that you had already developed and are supposed to be working still work, then you ensure that when you deploy to production, everything is up to standard. And that's what you want, because otherwise what you will do is, if you only develop in dev and then deploy to production within this middle environment, because you don't want to, you can test already in dev and it's not a big deal, well, you encounter lots of errors that could have been detected in this middle environment, but you didn't because you wanted to cut corners. So don't cut corners, have that middle test environment, and then detect everything there before it explodes in the face of your users. Third great benefit is, well, business continuity. We've been repeating that all these courses around the line, which is we don't want to disrupt day-to-day daily operations of your users. How? Because if they are working in this isolated production environment, while all the other things are happening and they don't know anything about it, for them it's just a black box. They are working in there, they don't even know that this developer test whatever exists, then you are guaranteeing that business as usual operations will continue without disruption while you are doing all those other things. And finally, very important, data protection. Why? Because while you won't be the first that you're using real production data while you're developing. Well, let's say that you want to test this delete row function that you have been requested, but you missed that conditional to signal that you only want to delete that one, and instead you delete all the records in the table. Well, guess what? You have a problem now. Why? Because you are working with production data while you are developing. And these things happen. I mean, we're human. It's happened to all of us. But you mitigate the risk if you don't have access to the productive data in development. Simply like that. You can have a copy because you want to use real live data. That's okay. That's the ideal scenario. Have a copy of the data. Maybe even obfuscated because you don't want the people who are developing to see the data. I mean, we can go miles from there. But in the end, you don't want to affect the productive systems while you are developing. And that doesn't only include the flows, the apps, whatever. It also includes the data. And that's real important. Believe me, you wouldn't be the first. Now let's see how all these things we've talked about, environment solutions, we will see in a moment, what this means in the system, in the portal and maker portal. So let's jump back to here to the maker portal. We were working with a flow, which was in the default environment. And now you see that if I select here, and I click in here, I can see different environments. I can select from the different environments I have access to. You will see different things depending on the access rights that you have in your system, in your company. And hopefully you can create new environments. In this step-by-step video, I show you how to create a developer environment. Let me know if you need help with that. And basically, here I have created 3 environments, as you can see, one for development, test, and production. And when we are talking about environments, we are not only talking about Power Platform most of the cases. You probably are working also with other technologies such as SharePoint Online. Probably you're working extensively with SharePoint lists. Now, so we not only have Power Platform environments, but sadly we have to introduce a little bit slight more complexity, which is basically these different sites, one for developer environment, another for test, and you see have a different list in a different site, and then in the marketing would be this production environment for our use case. And what we are really talking about is a more complex topic called, I encourage you to watch, to read the documentation. Microsoft documentation is great. Absolutely great. They've done a very good job documenting everything and providing best practices. And here in these articles about application lifecycle management, they talk about, let's say, the in-depth concepts behind all these that we're trying to cover in the course. And basically,
this ALM process is everything from when you think, design in your mind the solution you are going to be working on, up until when you deploy it and users use the actual solution. And this is a very complex topic, and it not only involves Power Platform solutions, but probably will involve other systems that you integrate with, whether it's SharePoint or other Microsoft products such as forms. Maybe you're using different forms because you have a form for dev, test, and prod again, or Teams, or whatever it is. But also could be SAP, Sage, any ERP third-party system, other things that you work with. So let's click in here. I'm going to click into this environment and select the developer environment. And when I click in here, you'll see that the portal is the same. By the way, I encourage you to use always make.powerapps.com instead of powerautomate.com. Uh, Basically, once you start working more and more with these technologies, you'll end up in this portal more than anything. And here, well, I see more flows because I'm in a different environment. I'm in one of the other boxes. We have three boxes, remember, dev, test, and prod. And in the dev environment, I have multiple flows because I'm working on multiple things. But in the default environment, I don't have much. And test and prod, I will have different things as well. So let's wrap it up and go to the OneNote and basically see what we have here. So let me, wait a second. Let me take a screenshot of this to put things into perspective in a second. Okay, so we have these Power Platform environments, then we have three different SharePoint sites. So let's see what we want to achieve with all this information. I'll leave it here and put this in kind of in a matrix fashion, right? So let's pick the pen and start drawing here. So basically what we want to achieve is the following. We have a developer environment, we have a test environment, and a production environment. And here we are really grouping in each environment two different sets of technologies. We have here SharePoint Online, and then we have here Power Platform, right? The dev, prod, and test in here, right? This is Power Platform, Power Platform, Power Platform. And what we want to do is develop in here, and once things are ready to test, deploy into this environment where we will say, hey, Power Platform solution, these flows have whatever I have here. Now you don't have to use this developers site and list. No, you have to point and use this test site and test list. And when we are ready, everything is working smoothly, all the test cases are covered, we have the sign off from the business, then we deploy into production, and basically here's where people are actually working. So if you haven't done this before, you will be thinking there are quite a few missing pieces here. How the hell do I do that? And most importantly, do I have to do flow by flow, app by app? How does this work? Well, we have another thing, another component that's going to make this transition between environments real smooth. And this is called a solution. So what we are going to have here, let's put it a box called solution. And this solution is what we are going to group all the components into. Think of it as a folder where we put all the components, flows, apps, whatever we have there. And then we say, okay, this solution in dev points to the dev test left side and list, and then we deploy the solution. The solution is the thing that we are going to be deploying between environments. Now let's see how that looks in the system. Okay, so let's jump to the portal again and go to this place called solutions. If you don't see that option in the menu, click here into more and you will see all the different options, and then you just click into the pin button here, and you need to have this available because this is where you should be working as a daily basis. Every day you work with the Power Platform, you should go into the solutions and go to the solution you are working with. And here you see I have different solutions, and think of them, as I told you, as a folder, and a folder where we will put all the different Power Platform components together, the ones that make sense. More advanced scenarios, maybe we have for the same project different solutions, but that's again more advanced scenarios. To create a solution, it's very straightforward. Just pick a name, then select a publisher. Publisher is who is developing this solution. I have my own publisher here. You can create your own here, basically fill in this form, and basically this is information that's going to travel with the folder. So it's going to be, let's say, the author of the folder, some metadata that's going to live within the folder. It doesn't have any other affectation, but it's recommended that you use it here in the publisher, because here you can see other publishers, CDS. This is what's called for command service. Before that, there was default publisher. You have others. If you go here to manage, you will see probably PowerCAD, Dynamics, Microsoft. You will see other solutions that are already in here. You didn't install, you didn't do anything. They are already there because there are components that come with the environment, and you can import other solutions from other people, from Dynamics, from other colleagues, from the internet. And what you do is you create your own, and they will see it when you create your own, they will see it under this unmanaged. What is the difference? Unmanaged, you can change them. Managed, you cannot. Let's jump into one here, for example. Let's jump in here, and you will see this banner, this notification here saying you cannot directly edit the objects within a managed solution. That means, well, you can edit them from there. There are caveats. You can access in here, default solution, because the default solution, whoops, in here, yeah, exactly. All the things that you create in the environment go to this default, are placed into the default solution by default, and then you also can have it in your own. Now let's go to this simple SharePoint solution that I created for the scenario. You have the files, everything along with the course. And here we see what's in the folder. And here, what are the sections? This is the principal main thing you need to look at, which are, let's say, kind of the subfolders. Subfolders inside this folder called 99 Simple SPO Solution. And here, subfolders, because we are grouping, well, this is done automatically. All the solution components in here, cloud flows, if we had apps, if we had tables, and other components, because look at this. When you hit new, here's what any component, powerful component that you can create in here. Apps, we have 3 types. Automations, we have cloud flows, but also different type of other workflows or automations, car chatbots, dashboards, security, tables, and more. Lot of things more. So there's plenty of things that will be appearing in here in this section as soon as you create them and are available to you. And let's take a look at the flow we are going to be working with, which is this one. And while it opens, I want to introduce you all. Okay, this is great about solutions, but how are we, let's say, implementing this link, right, between SharePoint and Power Platform? How are we able to say to this solution, hey, when you are in development environment, you use this site and this list, and when you're in test, this site, this list. When you're in production, this site, this list. How do we do that? Well, here's where environment variables come to the rescue. And environment variables are that variables that have value for the whole environment. Let's see an example inside this flow. Now it open, and here, well, this is a very simple flow where we are just retrieving the items from this list. We are checking the expiration date, and if the expiration date is within 10 days from now, then we are sending an email. Well, I create an HTML table and send an email, and then update these items to another status. Which status? Let's see the different status that we have here. Come on. And we have status soon to expire. So this is what we will select. And then another flow would set it to expire once it has expired. In this flow, what we want to tell it is that, hey, when you are using SharePoint connectors, you need to be, let's say, abstract yourself from which SharePoint site you are attacking to, right? You're integrating to. So let's click into one of the actions and see, pay special attention here. Here we haven't selected a SharePoint site or SharePoint list as we would normally do. Instead, what we are doing is picking an environment variable. Let's see how this looks like. Because here, normally, or the classic editor as well, you can pick dynamic data, right? And here you see this thing will be new for you. You are able to select the different environment variables from this environment. And well, here it's picking everything, but we have to select, of course, the correct one for the site and the correct one for the list. Let's see how these variables are inside them. What's inside of them? Now, if you click, first of all, in the site, what we will see is that here we have the definition of what specific site this variable is pointing to. We are telling this variable that is type SharePoint. From SharePoint, this is a site, and this is the current site, the current value for this environment variable in this environment. And same will happen to the list. It is a data type of SharePoint. This is a list instead of a site. And here we are saying, okay, which site is this list from? Well, from this other variable. We are connecting between variables even. And then which list from the site? This one. Now let's create together very quickly one environment variable of each test site. Here we are going to pick the data type of this environment variable and pay special attention to the different types that we can select here. Not only data stores as SharePoint, but also JSON, text, secrets for authentication, text for configuration. Maybe what we want to do is you see here we are sending an email. The two in the email right now is hard coded to my email address. But what if we want to have a different email address between environments and we want to configure it with an environment variable? There are other ways to do it, of course, picking from a different data source, whatever it is, but we could use an environment variable. And also environment variables are very handy for settings. We may want to have a JSON object to store different settings and then read that from a flow to, for example, pick other values for whatever we want to do. But in this case, we're going to pick the data source and we're going to pick SharePoint. Pay attention here as well. Hey, what's this? SAP ERP, Microsoft Dataverse, meaning to other environments. That's can be very handy. Maybe we want to log errors from the flow into a common environment, or all the approvals are going to point into a central approvals environment. So we could do that with that. So let's pick SharePoint parameter site. First we pick the site, then the list. Now here we are going to specify the current value for this environment. We can also set the default value. So when we don't have a value here, we will pick the value from the default environment, the default value. I don't usually do that unless this is a configuration setting that's common, for example, in dev and test, and only different in prod, things like that. But for SharePoint, doesn't make sense because we are going to have different sites per environment. So what we're going to do is pick this current value and select the appropriate site. Now, this is very recent, very new, but very handy. Here we can say, do we want to maintain this value when we deploy? So when we do this movement from dev to test and to production, when we do this deployment, do we want to maintain this value? No, of course, in this case, but we may want to do that in another case, in a different case. Now let's hit save. And we have an environment variable that is pointing to this side. And now let's pick the environment for the list. Okay, so test list. Now again, data source is going to be SharePoint, and then we are going to pick this list. This is a list, and then it's going to make us select the site. And site, we are no longer selecting a specific site from SharePoint, but an environment variable, which is going to be, well, this one from here, or I have other available to pick from the environment, which is not in the same solution, in other solutions for different purposes. So in this case, that's why these, you see, these naming conventions that we use, this is very important to detect or see very quickly which environment variable pertains to what. And here I'm going to pick the site, and then automatically it's detecting the lists available inside this site pointed by this test environment variable here. So this is very intelligent, right? So it's automatically detecting. Why? Because it's tied to the environment. Now we pick this one, select no. Oh, and here we go. I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to delete this one because I think you understood the idea, or I hope I explained myself correctly enough so that I was able to explain you the idea. Basically, what have we done? We have created a solution where we have put, imagine it as a folder, all the components that make sense, that live together, a SharePoint, sorry, for Ultimate Flow, and some environment variables to allow us to point to this site whenever we are deploying to these different environments that we have here. And remember, we have conceptually these constructs in our head as a methodology to obtain, to have this stability and reliability between systems. We have developer development environment, and in the development environment concept, this is a construct we have different technologies. We are integrating SharePoint with Power Platform, so we have different things to take into account. This dev side and the Power Platform environment, and then the same for test and the same for prod. We have seen how solutions allow us to put this link between technologies so that we can, when we deploy to a different environment, we can basically point to the proper third-party system. In this case, SharePoint, but it could be any other thing. With these environment variables, for example, imagine that it was uh, API you have to access to. Maybe then you have a text environment variable to point to the root endpoint of that third-party system you're integrating using the HTTP connector, for example. And this is how you do it. And inside Power Automate Flow, what you do is basically, when you're using the SharePoint connector, you use the environment variables instead of the actual hard-coded values. How can, well, this is going to be important. Let's see one moment. Let's pick here in the code view, dataset is the site, table is the list. Let's pick a hard-coded value without environment variables. Let's pick and get items from SharePoint. Okay, and let's pick here randomly a site, come on, and list. So I'm hard coding the values. I'm picking the values from here, so instead of using the environment variable. Let's see the code view. Here we see the SharePoint site and the value of the list. All right, now let's show you how we do this deployment between environments, right? Using these solutions that we have just learned how to do that right now. Basically, what we are going to do is we navigate to the overview section of the solution. And here, well, you can do different preferences, but I like doing it from here. What we are going to do is hit here in the export button, because what we are doing here is we are going to export here and then import here and import here. This is going to be the drill. Now, if we hit export, we're going to do now the manual process. We can automate this process different ways. GitHub Actions, the Azure DevOps Pipelines, this is, let's say, the pro code with programming, with the YAML files, all these kind of things. But now I have here kind of the ads for it. They're trying to say to you, we have these ALM pipelines that are low code, that we don't have to code anything there to configure them. So that's a great step forward, actually a leap, complete leap. And here Microsoft is, well, doing it perfectly. It's by far the most mature low code development platform because, again, for things like that, managed ALM to allow any user without high technical background to do these deployments automatically and effortlessly. Now, before doing that, and we're going to perform the manual process, because first we have to learn to do the things manually, then we can automate it. And we are going to publish first. So we hit the publish button, and once the publishing process finishes, because what's going to do is all the changes that we've done inside the solution, they are going to publish it in Dataverse, and then this is going to allow us to export it as a zip file. So I'm going to hit the button and wait for it to finish. And it's done. You see, it's published, and now we can hit next. And here is where we select managed or unmanaged. We already talked about that before. Managed, we won't be able to edit it once we import it, and unmanaged we do, but there are other implications. So please do the managed as recommended. And well, we simply will hit export. I won't do that because I already did that before. And here I'm going to show you, this is the zip that will be downloaded. I'm going to show you the internals of this zip, because this will bring some light into what's happening behind the scenes. So I'm going to open this folder. You see that there are some XML files and some folders in it. I'm going to open with Visual Studio Code to show you what's in the files. And it's very simple. Here basically we have solution, the definition of the solution, what it says, who is um, the publisher as we saw before, the name of the solution. Then we have here the definition of the flow, the environment variables. And because we have a very tiny solution, we don't have much, but the more we have, the bigger this structure is going to be. And basically, I wanted to show you this not because I'm a nerd, which I am, but because I want you to understand that behind the scenes, all these technical marvels that are happening are basically the IT foundations that always have in there. Files, um, HTTP calls, same as ever. But solutions in the end are files and a defined structure that Dataverse, the pool platform, is going to recognize when we import it into the test environment. So let's hit into the test environment. I'm going to navigate to the test environment. Come on. So I'm going to navigate to the test environment and import the solution there. And here we go. We're in the test environment and we're going to import the solution. Now I'm going to use the zip file that I exported before. I hit import. And now, well, what's going to happen here is that PowerShell is going to sign in with the user that I have, well, I'm performing this operation. Another best practice is to use service accounts to do the deployment, especially in production. Test doesn't matter that much, but in production, why is that important? See, for example, we are using here the Outlook connector. Service account is basically a technical account, an account with a technical name that doesn't belong to an individual user, but can be used by a team. And basically, we use it, for example, to perform the notifications so that it does the email to the users doesn't arrive with my name, my user, instead of a service account, like imagine HR notifications, Power Platform, for something like that. And not only it's important because of, let's say, the user-facing integrations or automations, but also because imagine that something goes sideways here and we need to refresh something or change, insert a hotfix or anything. We want to use the same account that you use to deploy the solution, and the whole team that's in charge of the support needs to have access to that account. We cannot rely on a single person who also may leave the organization. And if I leave the organization, all my connectors are going to be, well, they will expire, and we will need to refresh the connections everywhere where I've used my user to import the solution, which is not good, because then all the solutions that I have deployed will need to be refreshed with a new credentials. So in the meantime, at minimum, some solutions are going to stop working. and then we're going to cause a disruption. So you see, it's not only the technology, but also the methodology. We do the deployments, but deployments in different environments per se don't just magically solve the problem. We also need to use some methodologies, like for example, use a service account for the deployment. Now, the connections are established. We hit next, and here, very important, is where we are asked, okay, these environment variables, what value does it have, each of them, for this environment? So basically, we select the test site, and automatically I can use the one of the two lists. Now I hit import, and it will take a moment, so I'm going to pause, and it's done. Now we go in here, and then we are going to try run the solution. For that, before that, what I'm going to do is create an item here to test it out, and I'm going to put here test myself, item type, whatever it is, next Wednesday, whatever it is. I hit save, and I'm going to go into the flow, and I'm going to run it to see what's happening. And after I run it, I want to show you two very important things that we need to take into account when working with SharePoint Online as our data source, which is not what I would recommend. You see already some failed tests from before, and let's hit run with this brand new deployment, and it will work. Here it goes. Succeed. Perfect. Now here we have the environment variables, and in this environment where we are in test environment, where we are pointing to the test SharePoint site, guess what? Site address, test. Whoops, test here. And list, this other ID for the list. And here's the item that we just created with name test, title test. Great, so everything's working well, right? Now let's do the following. I'm going to delete the solution and start over again and introduce a bug into the ALM process. So what we're going to do, I'm going to delete the solution, and I'm going to do a slight change here. So imagine this list, we have two options. We can create them manually, and it should be the same way as the dev list in order to for everything to work, right? Or we can automate it. So we are going to, let's say, mimic that we had done this manually. And I'm going to role play here. Let's say that we created this list manually. And when I create the status column, I make a mistake. Where is the state choice here? Okay. And I'm here to put status with two S's instead of one. And here's oak. Here's what are the different options? Let me check it here. Soon to expire and expire. Don't worry about the colors. I'm going to hit save, and now I'm going to solution is deleted, but the flow runs are not. And I'm going to import again. All right. What it does, I'm going to pause the video and do the steps manually again. All right, it's done again. So I'm going to go inside and I'm going to execute the flow another time. But now it's not going to work because of what we did with the column. Allow me to pause one moment while it loads. Okay, here it goes. I deleted the solution, but the runs are stored in a database table, and that's why we see the runs before. These failed ones are from the same thing that I'm going to show you right now, but when I was recording in Spanish. So I'm going to hit run, and now we're going to see how this is going to fail. Boom, what happened? Same solution, same everything, right? Well, no, because this field status could not be found, as it says here. But you see here, oh, whoops, yeah, exactly right. Status is two S's, okay, no problem. Let's change the name, right? And hit save and hit run again. As you may imagine, this is not going to work. Why? Let's see that in a moment. So I'm going to hit run again, and boom, same error again. Even though I changed the name of the column. Isn't that right? Well, not exactly. Let's go to the list settings in here to understand why. Oops, let me refresh. To understand why this change that we did didn't actually solve the issue. Because behind the scenes, when we are working with Power Automate, with SharePoint, what we are using is let's say, when we change the field, the display name here, what is his name? This is the display name, but internally here, when I clicked into edit column, let me click again, go back to list settings. I went too quick, sorry. Uh, Click here into status, and this is the configuration of this column. Look at this. In the URL, we see, well, this is blah, 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 and here field status with two S's. So even though here it's written correctly, because the first time I created the column with this wrong name, then this is the name that's going to stay. This is called the internal name, and it's called the display name, right? So the display name can change as much as you want, but the internal name is the one you put first, and this is not going to change. So then we have a problem. Why? Because, well, to make it work, we would only need to delete this column and create it again with the proper name. But imagine that this can cause real problems when, we have something unnecessarily more complex, for instance, where we have, this is not the first time we do it. It's the third time when we have created a new column in development, and then we add a new column in production, and we deploy, and things start to go sideways. And well, it can be a pain in the ass to debug these kind of problems. But let's see one way or two ways to avoid this. So there are two ways we can avoid this problem with the columns. First is avoid using SharePoint from the beginning and using Dataverse. Why this can solve the problem? So I advocate for Dataverse versus SharePoint. Yes, 100%. And always, well, 99% of the 99.99. All right. Why? Well, Dataverse is superior in different things. We can have a separate conversation about that. Let me know if you want to have shoot a video explanation, of course, even about that. But basically, well, it's a superior data platform, not even a data source. SharePoint is not a proper database. We don't have role basis control. We have the problems with filtering. We need to index the columns ourselves, and there's a limit on that. Well, there are different problems, relationships between tables. But then ALM, because it's a separate system from Power Platform. SharePoint is a separate system, right? It's not built-in Power Platform. We have to take care of the columns and the definition of the list and so on separately. Instead, if we let's go to solutions, and I prepare here a simple Dataverse solution for you to see that here you see tables are in here, and tables are inside the solution. What does that mean? That when we make this solution travel between environments, the definition of the tables come together with the solution, meaning that if we change the tables, add columns, change the names of columns, relationships between tables, add new, remove columns, whatever we do, these changes are going to be maintained. We are going to bring that new solution with the data configuration, not the data in terms of the rows of the tables, but we're going to bring all that new configuration together with the solution into the new environment. So we don't have to toggle this change track in between. Okay, I created a new column in here. Let's create it in test again or in production before we deploy, because otherwise this is going to break. Now, if we're forced to use SharePoint because, for example, our organization doesn't want to pay premium licenses, which is a huge mistake. But anyway, if that happens, what can we do? Well, we can automate the creation of the SharePoint lists. Luckily for you, if you don't know PowerShell, I have prepared a resource that you can download from the course materials, and I will show you how to use it right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this list over here. So contents, I'm going to delete this list. And here I prepared this PowerShell script along with an Excel template that you can use to automatically create the lists that you need with the columns that you need. And this way you maintain an Excel file where you define your lists, and then you use that Excel file to maintain the same data structure in all your environment chains, dev, test, and prod. Well, it's a very easy to understand script if you want to dive into it. And basically what we are going to do is, let me to open, here we have in the import files, SPList Excel sheet. We have here one worksheet. Oh, you can see that. Wait a second. Now you do. Perfect. So here we have one worksheet per list. So if we want an additional list, what we will do is right click, duplicate. Can we duplicate? Or just create a new one? No, I'd say duplicate. Can we? We should be able to do that. Anyway, uh, two, and create, just copy the table if you want, and start rolling. Important that you copy the table because there are, here in this table, have some important things. Well, we define, so this would be the name of a list. This is the internal name again, so please don't put a special characters and don't put spaces. Then we have here internal column name of the, now we are defining the columns inside this list. So these are the columns. You see, without spaces, without anything. Then the display name, we add here the spaces and any special characters if you have a non-English language, for example. And then column type, I've provided you with these choices. Or here with this drop down inside the Excel file. With these columns, you should be able to cover most of the cases. If you want additional one, there's here, just right click and unhide uh, this worksheet where I put basically the way to have this drop down in place. And then if this is if you select a choice, please put the different options with semicolons. If the column is in text or no or not, yes or no, and if you want to add it to the default view. Now the PowerShell script, what it's going to do is basically, you can see here, connect to SharePoint Online, read the information from this Excel file, and per each of the worksheets, create a new list and create the list columns. And the creation of the list columns, very straightforward in here, and we are using these data types. If you want, for example, to use person multiple, then please create a new case here using the same, everything, the documentation is online, and I will add a readme document here for you to see how to use this PowerShell script, and also how to install the libraries that we are using. We are using PNP PowerShell, an open source library to connect to SharePoint, among other things inside Microsoft, and import Excel, which is also a library to read and write Excel files with PowerShell from your computer. Now, I'm going to trigger this PowerShell. So we have here this test site. What I would do is, before the first deployment, then hit the script. Now it's finished, and it has created the list over here. Great. And here we have the list with the proper columns, the same way it's been done in the developer environment. Now, I'm going to move me back up here. Okay. If you want to modify the script, be my guest, you can download it, do whatever you want with it, change it. For example, you want to just to have a new flag in the Excel file to modify. This is a new column or not, so that the script knows I have to create the column or no in this new environment, etc. But basically, we've seen here how to deploy solutions, how to update the environment variable so that we point to the correct SharePoint resources, SharePoint site, SharePoint list, which in the most common problem that we have when performing ALM deployments using SharePoint as our data source, which is the maintaining the correct name of the columns, the internal name of the columns, and here, well, as a gift, you will receive this PowerShell script so that you can use it to maintain this coherence between SharePoint lists in the different sites and different environments. And my recommendation again, please advocate for Dataverse. Learn how to do that. If you are lacking knowledge on Dataverse, hit me up. I think I will be able to provide you with my assistance and maybe in the next months a course on how to use Dataverse from zero to a very good level. I hope this was useful content for you and you enjoyed it. I sure did creating the course for you, and I hope this you've understood all the points that we've talked about in here. Otherwise, hit me up. I will try to assist you. Take care.